Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Damage Report here in our second phase of quarantine in a big building with no other people in it. I feel like it's the Walking Dead days. And I'm probably not the only one. Welcome back to the show. Lots of news to get to. Our country's falling apart, and we're going to touch base with the man pushing it over the edge in interview after interview, Donald Trump. But you know who's going to be doing that with me today? A blast from the past, one of the original TDR crew, Dan Evans, joins us on the show once again. How's it going, Dan?
Hello, humans. I am so happy to be back on the old stomping grounds. Good to be with you, John.
It's great to have you here. Dan was one of the, basically the original producers on The Damage Report. He is now a leftist video creator doing awesome sort of video essays and breakdowns of what's going on. What's some of the most recent stuff that you've talked about on your channel, Dan?
Yes, so at youtube.com/Dan from the internet, where you can begin to go down the rabbit hole that is me, I did a really long, almost like ContraPoint style breakdown on like why news is so depressing and how to turn that feeling into something that's hopefully a lot more proactive and productive in society. And I'm starting a not competing with John at all, of course, but like a small political show series where I'm interviewing really cool people who talk about political issues from the left. It's very occasional. It's only a couple of weeks on weekends, but you can all check that out at youtube.com/Dan from the internet, where I'm sure I might be able to guilt John into being a guest in at some point.
That sounds awesome. Okay, and the fact that you threw me that little bone at the end means that I no longer feel the knee-jerk reaction that was building up while you were speaking to utterly crush you.
You see, that's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing, is because when we were naming it, it has report in the name as well. Now it's like, is John going to? Yeah, whatever.
I mean, it could be the Damage Report. I think that'd be pretty good. But anyway, very happy to have you on. Everyone needs to buckle up. / also hold on to your butt, because this is going to be a weird show, okay? Donald Trump spent literally every waking moment of yesterday being interviewed, and I mean, we've got some real breakout moments of a couple of different categories. Of this is really, really dark and scary moments, we've got at least two of those, and only one has to do with the Kenosha terrorist. And then the grandpa's off his meds moments, and it's just, to some extent, maybe it's kind of funny, but he's in power, he's in charge, and so I need you to brace for impact on the stuff that we're going to go through throughout today. We've also got a little bit of Joe Biden, who is technically running for president, so we're going to see how is he responding to the way Donald Trump wants this campaign to go, what sort of turf he wants it to be fought on. So we're going to have that. A little bit of an update on the national coronavirus strategy, and we'll see. We have a little story for the end. We'll see if we get to it, if we have time. But if you're already here and watching, whether on YouTube or on Twitch or literally anywhere, maybe platforms I don't even know exists because I'm not a Zoomer, you can hit the like button, share the stream, let more people know that the show is going on. And if you want to chat along with us, we'll chat back with you, whether it's on the YouTube comments, super chats, Twitch, or Twitter. Dan and I will be responding to some of your messages as we go on. We do have one brief bit of business to get out of the way before we launch into our stories. And I apologize if I'm wrong, Dan. The last time you were on, I think that was before the new craze of on the show, every guest having to choose or be chosen for a Marvel or DC avatar. Philosophically, yes. What sort of hero are you, Dan?
I asked someone about this over the weekend, and I'm going to be specific about when I was asked this and when I gave my answer, because it was on this past Friday. And I asked if Killmonger was an option, not because I completely agree with his strategy, but let's just say as the right gets more radical, I get a little more Benjamin Dixon has a good quote about saying, I want to just grill and be with my kids, but I will turn my garage into a guillotine factory if necessary. And I'm starting to really understand that sentiment, politically speaking. So yeah, I guess
Killmonger. I don't think that Killmonger was taken. Feel free, obviously, in the news recently. That's a good one. That's a bold one. I take a bit of issue with some of his strategy, as we were talking about before the show. But I get, in a political sense, what you're talking about.
Well, listen, John, we can't do these purity tests on the left forever. I think sometimes we need to just like go with our gut and do a more forward-facing strategy.
I agree. And that's why, you know what? I'm just going to come out with it. Like some people, I think we're saying like Captain America. No, I want to be Thanos. Okay. There's too many people. I've been saying this for a long time. And now, no, it's not going to go that far. This is a metaphor after all, just a metaphor.
I cannot wait for this to be clipped out on the right. Let's go.
Letting that their leader is Thanos. So anyway, I can't expect them to be consistent. So with that, why don't we launch into our topics? We've got a lot to get through. We're in a dark place in our country, but we're going to try to come out of the other side. Zane sent in a super chat saying, welcome to the Danage Report, Killmonger and John. Nice. Okay, with that, let's do this thing. Ever since the Kenosha terrorist, Kyle Rittenhouse, murdered multiple people, some while trying to flee from his first murder, we have been predicting that the right would rally around him, defending him and perhaps lauding him as a hero. It didn't take long. Tucker Carlson started doing it almost instantly, and all the randos on Twitter and YouTube, they immediately saw him as one of their own. But Trump has been a little bit cagey about talking about it up until this point, liking some tweets implying that he's a hero. But he's being asked specific questions now. Here he is yesterday during his press conference being asked about Kyle Rittenhouse and his multiple murders. Take a look at how he handled that question.
It was a supporter of yours, Mr. President, who killed someone that is accused of killing two people. It's a supporter of yours.
Saying, are you going to condemn the actions of vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse?
We're looking at all of it. That was an interesting situation. You saw the same tape as I saw, and he was trying to get away from them, I guess, it looks like, and he fell, and then they very violently attacked him. And it was something that we're looking at right now, and it's under investigation. But I guess he was in very big trouble. He would have been. He probably would have been killed. But it's under investigation.
Do you think private citizens should be taking guns?
I'd like to see law enforcement take care of everything. I think everything should be taken care of, law enforcement. But again, we have to give our cops back, our police back their dignity.
Okay, so asked to denounce a guy that murdered multiple people, who brought a gun illegally that he never should have had, illegally across state borders, to a place he never should have been, killed someone, and while people tried to apprehend the murderer, killed additional people. I mean, come on, if you really thought Trump is going to finally, at this late moment, turn and embrace the light and say, okay, look, I'm a demagogue, but at some point a line has to be drawn. Welcome to 2020 America. No. He said, he probably would have been killed, and we gotta give our cops our dignity back. Like, I mean, they were really coming at him hard, and I'm gonna pretend that I don't know that he was fleeing his first murder already, and indeed would flee all the way back to his home state. They did it. He's defending him, Dan. He's defending the murderer, the terrorist.
I mean, John, I remember when we were doing this around the Heather Heyer times, where Trump got up and said there are very fine people on both sides. And there was, back then, I subjected myself to much more Ben Shapiro than I do now. But back then, even the argument wasn't even what you were saying, that like, look, it's very clear that Trump is dog whistling to racists or giving a pass to racists. But actually the conservative argument and framing back then, which I think was actually kind of interesting, was that, look, we kind of knew who Trump was when we were getting into it. He's not always the smartest person. He's not always going to deliver things in the most clear, kind of finely tuned way. He's not a typical president. That was the appeal of him. But that was a really awkwardly sort of way to kind of dance around the fact that, yeah, he is doing really terrible things rhetorically that have political consequences, such as giving these right-wing terrorists, they need to be called terrorists and like nothing different, a pass. There was that study from 2018 or 2019 that was like 98 or 100% of all of the domestic terror incidents in the country were because of right-wing terrorists. It's a thing that the Trump side of the party has been dragging their feet on addressing, because it's part of their voting bloc. It's part of their base. It gives them some like negotiating power on the global stage, because like people don't want to or his political opponents don't want to touch that or poke the bear per se. So
Yeah.
we need to be forceful, continue being forceful in calling this out for what it is.
Yeah, 100%. And what the strategy is, and all of the different forms that the hypocrisy takes, and then even beyond how obviously wrong it is, like the truths that I think we all understand at this point that lie underneath, which is like Donald Trump is getting up there, and no matter what his followers do, he will always defend them. Worst case scenario, he'll both sides it, as we'll get from Kayleigh McEnany a little bit. But if it's Kyle Rittenhouse murdering multiple people, if it's people in Portland, as we'll get to, shooting paintballs at people, if it's supporters of his that are sending pipe bombs to places, there's never going to be sort of like a taking stock. And there doesn't need to be, because we're not supposed to say this. We're supposed to be polite and imply that Americans across the political spectrum, Americans that identify under different parties, we disagree on some things, but we're fundamentally all the same at the end of the day. No, we're not. His supporters want more vigilante murders. They want more domestic terror incidents like this. They didn't think that pipe bombs being sent to CNN was a terrible thing. They don't think Kyle Rittenhouse going to Kenosha and shooting people is a terrible thing.
Like John,
they think it's good, and they want more of it, and they will support Trump even more the more of it there is. And he and Fox News are telling them every day that this is needed, that this is patriotic, that this is the best thing you can do, is to brutalize people, to murder people, to terrorize people. That's what his base wants. That's why they're supporting him. It is not economic anxiety, okay? It is weaponized murderous xenophobia and hatred. That's what it is.
And yes, on top of that, he is also telling his base that Black Lives Matter, the organization that we started the show by saying not every organization or group is perfect, but they've been on the front lines for years now on this front of racial injustice and criminal injustice in our country. And he's calling them the terrorist organization, stoking fear and provoking these kinds of incidents. And like you mentioned a really good point about the consequences of not taking stock of these incidences when they happen. We have the consequences now. More people are dying. I hate to be the kind of person like bring myself into the story too much, but I feel less safe in the last couple of months before the election with this being the political climate, this being the dividing lines between people, whether or not someone who killed someone else at a political event was right or wrong. Like as a African American male, like it sucks. It sucks that this is the country that we're living in, and these are the direct consequences of that.
Yeah, and before we move on, I just want to say I tweeted something to this effect earlier, and it's seems sick / is sick to have to say something like this, but I really do think that at this point, we as a country, we, I guess on the left, or even a lump in centrist, people who are not part of MAGA or whatever, people who might participate in these protests, we are so lucky at this point that they are just coming to the streets of places like Kenosha and Portland and murdering individual people. That seems sick, but that's not the end game of this. Kyle going there and shooting 2 people is not the worst that this could or probably will be. That is not the violence that they're craving on the right. They want something bigger, and they have enough people, enough crazy people with access to enough weapons that it is not going to be limited to 2 people being shot at any one time. It's going to be a bomb, or it's going to be a mass shooting. That is what this is building to. Now, we've had murders throughout, like basically from the very beginning, whether it's cops or random right-wingers trying to run people down, shooting them. That's happened multiple times. But at some point, it's going to be way bigger. And I want to prep everyone in the audience for that horrible day. That will not be the line that finally causes them to turn back either. Trump will be asked a question at some point about the 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 people that were killed, and he will what about it? He will say, well, Antifa did something one time. So just prepare yourself for that. It's going to get a lot darker, even before the election. But if Trump gets reelected after running on this law and order, stamping out the fascist communist threat thing, he's not going to suddenly just set that to the side because he won re-election. So just prepare yourself for it to get much darker, and for there to be no line at the end of the day that will cause them to turn away from this. Now, Trump defending Kyle Rittenhouse. I know that for some people it's shocking. I really don't think it should be, because right-wing media has been doing it from the very beginning. I want you to take a look at Tucker Carlson literally last night exercising madness about what exactly Kyle had gotten up to that night.
Kyle, the only individuals that Kyle shot were the 3 individuals that were attacking him and putting him at risk of serious bodily harm or death. This is a 17-year-old kid. This is amazing.
So let me ask you this, and I think that's a fair point. He didn't shoot indiscriminately, and I'm taking your word for it in the first one because I haven't seen the video, but in the second 2, I have seen the video. One guy attacked him, the other guy.
Okay, so we cut that off because we don't need any more. He's taking this guy's word about what happened because he hasn't seen the video. That was last night. The shooting was almost a week ago, and he's opining every night saying, I mean, I haven't actually bothered to watch a 20-second video, so I'm just going to take your word that he hadn't yet committed a brutal, unnecessary murder that he was attempting to flee justice from. I mean, look, I know I focus too much on Tucker Carlson sometimes, Dan, I know, but he's like got the biggest audience, and that's the framing they're getting on what happened in Kenosha if they're watching Tucker Carlson each night.
Yeah, like I almost have to let's check in, John. Like there was there or was there not footage showing a little bit before the event where it appears, and this is still an ongoing investigation, but it appears that Rittenhouse was provoking the protesters in the beginning. Am I correct?
Yes, I mean, there's a million videos you can watch, but yeah, you can see that his first what seems to have happened in his first murder is someone threw a bag at him and he shot them in the head. And then as others tried to save that individual's life, he fled on camera saying into a radio or a phone, I just killed somebody. And he attempted to flee because, of course, he'd murdered someone and he had no interest in talking to the cops or being investigated or anything. And then in attempting to flee justice, people did what they're supposed to do, which is stop the murderer from killing more people. So they tried to take him down, something that we generally laud people as heroes when they try to take down an active shooter, which is what he was. But that is now the justification for their murder as well, that he was fleeing justice and he, because he's white, apparently is allowed to.
Yeah.
All of this was available the first day.
Yeah, so that's the other thing that's annoying and difficult is that you always have to, before you even deconstruct the argument with these people, you have to take the thing they're saying and rip it out of the fantasy bubble that they are living in and give it the sunlight of truth and tell them, hey, here's what actually happened. Here's what's going on here. And because, I mean, let alone he brought the gun over state lines, let alone he wasn't supposed to have the gun in the first place because he's 17, let alone the other video that's come up that shows his sort of violent past. I mean, I hate beating up on him because he's a kid, but also he killed people now, so we've got to do that. There's an apparatus that goes from Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson and Fox News, and sometimes it's a symbiotic relationship. But the reason that people like you and I and a lot of the other great folks, there's a great thread that Nikki McCann Ramirez over at Media Matters has put together of instances in which Fox News hosts are defending the Kenosha shooter, and it's 24 tweets deep now. This is an apparatus in which people are getting their information from at a time when the choices are so stark in this country between the forces of darkness and literally they're willing to get people from the government to round them up in cages and send them to who knows where, all the way up to literally just doing not that, going back to the same terrible system that we had before, but just dialing back a little bit. The choices are so different now that having this news apparatus on the side that is poisoning the well of information is that's part of what's breaking the discourse. So I'm glad that we are paying at least attention to it. But yeah, it's not surprising that Tucker Carlson or any other of these ghouls are scraping the bottom of the barrel to defend right-wing domestic terrorism. Can you believe that in the year 2020, the Republican Party is defending domestic terrorism in the United States? I can't.
And the weird thing is, one of the skills that the right has in reporting that is turned in the service of evil is if a black man is shot to death, they're going to track down anything he did that can be spun to make him seem any less sympathetic. A picture, any sort of incident or whatever, they're going to find it instantly because the victim has to be portrayed as the aggressor, of course. But it's odd that with this guy who had just killed a couple people in Kenosha, it wasn't Tucker Carlson that tracked down a video of him running up behind a woman and beating on her with his fists. It's weird that they didn't track down this background information about the motivations and frame of mind of this individual, and they don't seem to care about it. They're still defending him days after we found out that this is hardly the first time that he has instigated violence against people. It's weird how that works out. I wonder why. I don't know.
Because here's exactly right. Because when you're on the right and you fit their narrative perfectly, even if you're the murderer, you have a gun and you're defending yourself for at least part of the video, for at least part of what happened that night. So therefore, he is standing his ground. He's defending himself. He represents every person who, rightfully so, especially in this political climate, just wants to make sure that they and themselves are safe. They themselves and their family are safe from any sort of danger, all the way up to these Proud Boys who are now gathering in countries in cities to counter demonstrate and show off their guns and potentially provoke people. The right wing is willing to give a defense to all of those people because of getting into power to sustain this racist system and get tax cuts. That's why they're doing it.
Yeah, 100%. You know what, Skip? Can we skip ahead? Let's get the Kayleigh video ready because I need a break for just a couple moments from Trump's insanity. We had more of him talking about CNN supporters murdering people. Like a lot of people watch CNN. Nobody's passionate about it. Nobody's driven and murdered by it. I think we can all agree on that. It's terrible, but not because it inspires murder. Anyway, Trump spent part of his press conference implying that all of the video coming out of his supporters driving into cities like Portland with trucks, with Trump flags and all of that. And we showed you the video yesterday of them trying to run over people, spraying them with mace, shooting them with paintballs, just randomly terrorizing a town. He's perfectly fine with that. These are patriotic individuals, of course. And Kayleigh McEnany was asked about that. How can he label these people as patriotic? But she didn't miss a beat.
I want to ask you about one of the president's other tweets this weekend. He took a video or retweeted a video of a caravan of people driving into Portland with Trump and American flags flying. He called them great patriots. What about that image does the president see as patriotic? And ostensibly, you're talking about people going into a city in which they don't live, presumably to protect property they don't own. What's patriotic about that activity?
The president was highlighting that these were good Americans going in to peacefully be a part of a protest and show their voice. And that's what he was noting by the tweet and highlighting the video, which he routinely does.
What about the video of them scuffling, shooting paintballs at people, getting in the mix with people? Is that patriotic activity?
I don't think the president's seen that video, nor have I. But if you're going to ask about paintballs, it's incredible that for 90 days I've stood at
cut it off because she transitioned immediately to once you try to get her to respond to a specific incident that she definitely has seen and that Donald Trump has definitely seen, because Donald Trump spends every waking moment on Twitter. As I'm saying this, he's on Twitter right now. He sees the videos. They immediately turn to, well, what about something else that happened? I'm asking you a specific question about this, but she's going to move to something else. And so them driving in and trying to run people down, mimicking the techniques that ISIS terrorists have used in any number of attacks around the world, and randomly spraying people with pepper spray and with paintball, shooting them with paintballs. That's perfectly fine and patriotic. And if you really try to pin me down, I'm just going to change the subject to something else. But at the end of the day, what this means is that in the days following one of their supporters murdering people in the streets of Kenosha, they now have Proud Boys and the Patriot Bible whatever and the Boogaloo and all of those moving to all these cities. They are not going to condemn them. Even when the videos come out of them brutalizing people, they're not going to condemn them because they support their supporters coming and hunting us down. Again, harsh truths, but it's America in 2020. They support these sorts of things.
You're right. You got part one of that, which was the mechanism that they're using. They're using whataboutism, or they're switching your attention. They're trying to switch your attention to something else to ignore from something. Part two, what is the thing they are trying to distract from? So later on in that same clip, before you cut it off, she starts talking about the number of officers who have been arrested and those people who have been the number of officers who have been injured because of the Black Lives Matter protests, who have gone to the hospital for all these different things. Never mind the protesters who have gone to the hospital. Never mind the Black people who they're protesting about who die before making it to the hospital. Like, this is what they're distracting from. This is what they're trying to take the attention away from. And when you see that their deflection is always about that, ignore the very racist thing you're seeing right now. Ignore the racial history moment that you're seeing right now. Ignore the awakening that a lot of Americans are finally having right now to systemic police brutality and racial injustice in this country. Ignore that because we have some cherry-picked statistics here that fit our narrative. I mean, that's of course what you expect from a press person, but you have to realize their strategy, and it's like top down from the media, from their media to their politicians to their press. It's deflect from what's going on because the thing that's going on is racism that they're totally fine with.
Yeah. No, I mean, you are, of course, 100% right. And then they'll never focus on that. I mean, how much does Kayleigh appear to care about the people that were killed in Kenosha? Don't care at all.
You can tell because like that's the first thing she pivots to is like, oh, well, I don't care about the people who were killed or the people who were injured or any of this other thing. I'm going to go to what's politically advantageous for me. It's like she has that like binder of how to deal with Trump. What's politically advantageous to me? COTS, Blue Lives Matter. Let's do that. It's a sick playbook. It's a really sick playbook.
I would say they're definitely trying to distract from that. I would say that I would assume that what they don't want is a national reckoning on how horrific the response to COVID-19 has been and continues to be. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later on the show. That should be a failure that literally nothing should be able to save your reelection bid. But if anything will, in America, it's going to be racist appeals because we are a fundamentally racist country and we always have been. Now, that said, we're going to turn to a little bit more on police brutality. But before we do that, I did want to check in with the audience, see what's been going on in the super chat. First out the gate today, Weena Jensen says, lots of trolls present. That means the damage report is significant and therefore a threat. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we do try to block them. It's difficult to do it live during the show. So I weed out a few. So if you can, feel free to let me know if there's anyone who's particularly bad. Craig left a message in the chat saying Dan repping Tie Tuesday. That's why he's the best. Miss you, Dan.
Miss you, Craig.
Exactly. Yeah, we used to always wear ties on Tuesdays. Now I don't even remember how to tie one. Okay. Franklin Sharpslicer, with one of his poems, says, at risk of brevity, a touch of levity, a modest suggestion I will leave at thee. Brett's lying elixir could be a TYT fixer if marketed in jest as a funds-raising kicker. P.S. Remember Ferengi rules. Ha. I don't know the Brett's lying elixir. Is that a happy half-hour thing?
No, Brett did another one of those. Remember Simon Simonson? So he just did another one of those. He's got a new one. I'm not going to spoil it for you. It's very good. Shout out Brett Ehrlich. It's very, very good.
I have to see that. Zane says, Dan, I'm the one who asked Dan which MCU DC character he is. I assume that must have been on Twitter?
Yes, that's what happens on Twitter. Awesome. Hi. But yes, so yeah, real talk. I never really got too into the superhero movies. I just like I'm such a contrarian in real life, and John understands this to a point that annoys him, but he appreciates me anyways. Hashtag free Hassan Minaj. But there is still the only superheroes I really liked were like Deadpool and like Black Panther. And then my political proclivities kind of unironically / ironically put me into Killmonger 2020. So I picked Killmonger.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Deadpool's great. I do like Deadpool. I've always considered myself more of like a Star Trek or a Star Wars person, but I don't know. Lately, I'm thinking that Marvel is moving up to potentially the first place for me in terms of what pop culture thing hits you the hardest and gets to like the deepest part of you. And I know it's stupid. It's about people flying around with capes and stuff like that, but it's not. Underneath that, it's about themes and values, and I don't have to agree with all of it, but it is particularly effective. Yeah, I'll
give you that. But I mean, we can't also we'd be remiss to not mention DC and their whole Batman Joker thing. Those films are incredible because they're really dark and powerful.
Those were good.
Like Joker pilled is like one of the phrases of 2020 now, so they've got us there.
They do. Wayne Sagara says, Happy Tuesday. John, you and your guest are on point with your comments about Trump and his supporters. I am loving this dialogue this morning, inspiring me a lot. Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate that. Agent Smith, thank you for your emojis. Awesome. Thank you. Nick McNugget said, John, what you just said gave me chills. I had a nightmare last night that snipers were shooting people of color from roofs and trees, and I've been uneasy all day. Well, bear in mind, I think it was the Proud Boys. I could be wrong. I think it was the Proud Boys that were found with a cache of guns on a roof a while back. And it's just totally cool. They didn't get any trouble for it. It was totally fine. Obi-Wan Kenobi, thank you as always for gifting your subs on Twitch. Brother Mucker also doing it, gifting a few. Thank you so much for that. And saying, paying forward the gift they got from Obi-Wan Kenobi. What do you know? Look at that. People paying it forward. Thank you.
Incredible name,
What's that?
That person was Brother Mucker, right? That's an incredible name. Incredible.
Good job. On Twitch, Galfar says, at Dan, Killmonger, really? He's not even an anti-hero like Deadpool or Punisher. He's a straight-up villain.
Yes, and if you knew me in a way that John is pleasured/cursed to know, you would understand that I am also a villain. I am definitely like chaotic neutral at minimum as a person, so we'll work with that.
Exactly. And also, I mean, look, I have a bit of issues. I think I've said on the show before, I thought that one of the lower points of Black Panther is I didn't love Michael B. Jordan's portrayal of Killmonger. I thought it was just a little bit one note, which isn't necessarily his fault. He wasn't given a lot of time on screen, a lot of scenes and stuff like that. But one of the reasons it really hits as a villain is you ideally want your villains to be sort of understandable, that you get where they're coming from. And that's why Killmonger was a good villain, and that's why the villains in all the novels I've written are really, really bad. It's important to understand their motivations and for them to have motivations beyond just Mwahaha. And Killmonger isn't that.
I agree with that.
That's good. I like that. Okay, with that, let's jump back into the news. This time, Trump opining on police brutality and Black Lives Matter. So again, hold on to those butts. Donald Trump had an interesting way of talking about police brutality. Take a look at the metaphor he rolled out here.
They can do 10,000 great acts, which is what they do, and one bad apple, or a choker. You know, a choker. They choke. Shooting the guy in the back many times. I mean, couldn't you have done something different? Couldn't you have wrestled? You know, I mean, in the meantime, he might have been going for a weapon, and, you know, there's a whole big thing there. But they choke. Just like in a golf tournament, they miss a 3-foot.
You're not comparing it to golf because, of course, that's what the media.
I'm saying people choke.
People panic.
Choke.
Yeah.
And people are bad people. You have both. You have some bad people, and they choke. You could be.
Look, sorry, John, you ever go bowling and, you know, you're not that great at bowling, so you get those things on the gutter that prevent you from possibly getting a gutter ball? Laura Ingraham was that. There were so many ways where Trump could have, like, easily destroyed himself there. But no, that's why he goes on Fox News for the softball, because they provide him with a little gutter in the lane, so he can't possibly hit at least one pin. He can at least speak English sometimes.
That's pretty good. I like that Fox News is duckpin bowling for Donald Trump. That's a good metaphor. I also like that Laura Ingraham is taking him out on a walk, but he's one of the kids that has to be on a line, just in case he gets too far away. Laura Ingraham was saving crazy grandpa from himself. That's what was happening there. He rolled out an insane comparison, an insane metaphor that in normal times would end a politician's career. Maybe not a president, but it would certainly be its own news cycle for a week. The idea that you talked about golfers in particular, but honestly, that's not even, what are you talking about choking? This isn't a free throw. This isn't a buzzer beater. They decided to take out a gun because they're trained to fear black people and to be so afraid and to believe that their fear is justification for murder. They didn't mess up in darts. They murdered a person, or in this case, attempted to murder a person and miraculously did not. And he is such a sociopath that he goes to literally the only thing he's passionate about, which is golf, of all things. And she tries to save him because the media would lose it over this. Not a rational human being would lose it over a president comparing the murder of countless unarmed individuals to a bad putt. It's the irrational media that's doing that. That's what very serious journalist Laura Ingraham is doing there.
And keep in mind, very serious journalist Laura Ingraham is willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, but he's not trying to compare, like you said, the split-second decision to kill a person of color to a split-second mistake in a sporting event. Like, never mind that Trump is given that amount of benefit of the doubt from the right. Mm-hmm. But then when Trump says, anyone in the media, they're part of Antifa. I think part of that during that same press conference that happened just yesterday or just recently, Trump said that the media and Antifa are on the same side. This is the same Trump that's saying Antifa is a terrorist organization and says the media is the enemy of the people and the enemy of him. Like, mm-hmm. It's obvious now. I'm just saying it's obvious. This is a person who is, if you don't want to use the F word, a massive authoritarian in waiting who has been able to coalesce aspects of the country along with his ideology in waiting. I think it's not too far to say that he has fascistic tendencies, but people try to get all academic with that. I don't know. When your life is in danger, we can talk about the difference between like fascism and proto-fascism and whatever. But like, there is the fact that even if I'm not being outwardly political, I might be wearing a mask outside, and some like Trump person might be eyeing me up or looking me up differently, or I am just a black person and I am walking outside and someone with a Blue Lives Matter flag is like eyeing me up differently, or maybe they're like carrying a gun or something. Like, that's my life now. That's my life for the foreseeable future while Trump is president, and actually a little bit afterwards. So like, the impacts of this administration have to be fully kind of addressed and touched on there. But you'll notice that it really isn't in the right-leaning media because they're in the bag for him.
Oh yeah, I mean 100%. Like, if you don't fully support Donald Trump, and there were people initially on Fox News that liked a different candidate, but no, they've been weeded out. And finally on the metaphor, the idea that it's like the cost of choking a sporting event versus killing someone. And he's calling them chokers when they frequently strangle black men to death. And we're going to move on. Even we who are covering this, we're going to move on because we're going to be forced to move on. This thing, we have to accept and normalize and move on from things every day that should have stopped the country in its tracks, but can't. Let's move on. On Black Lives Matter, Donald Trump, who of course cares about Black Americans a great deal, he has a little bit of branding advice for them from his Laura Ingraham interview.
Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization. You remember pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. That was the first time I ever heard of Black Lives Matter. I said, that's a terrible name. It's so discriminatory. It's bad for black people. It's bad for everybody. And all of a sudden it becomes like sort of, although now if you look, it's going way down because people are tired of this stuff, what's going on, the Black Lives Matter. If you look at what's going on with the bats and a lot of thugs.
Running through D.C. last night.
Oh, it's terrible what's going on. But
Okay, so Dan, he's obviously a great businessman, great at branding and everything. What do you think about his advice to Black America to possibly rethink that whole Black Lives Matter thing?
Right. So in business, you do a thing called a SWOT analysis, which are like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I
think I saw that in Silicon Valley, if I remember correctly.
Trump may have seen that in foggy parts of his brain when he went to the University of Pennsylvania Business School, allegedly. But his even analysis of Black Lives Matter is off. Obviously saying they're a terrorist organization is ridiculous, but the pigs in a blanket fry 'em like bacon, the main thing that he has gotten wrong is by, trying to put in the air that, Black Lives Matter membership is going down or going lower. And he can't be saying that while simultaneously saying that there is a mob in the streets caused by Black Lives Matter that's been going on for 90 days, conveniently around the time that people got fed up with Trump's treatment of the death of a person of color while it was a coronavirus pandemic that was disproportionately affecting people of color. He can't simultaneously have the opinion that Black Lives Matter is losing membership while it's a siege that he needs to be maintaining the office of the presidency for in order to beat. And that's how it's one of the easier tells of fascism. You're in power and you're strong and you're forceful while simultaneously you're weak and constantly under attack from all of these threats. It's double speak even right there. Never mind the other dumb things he throws in that part of that part of the interview.
Yeah, you're 100%. I love the analysis of the strength and weakness, and that has always been the case. I mean, and it's been a big part of Fox News's history of taking this monolithic, massive white conservatives and telling them that they are in fact always the victim. You're the best and the strongest and the best and the brightest and all that, but you're also always under siege and always the victim. That is 100% true. Yeah, it's discriminatory. It's bad for Black. I mean, like, I don't understand what, like, first of all, he doesn't care, and he's not actually thinking about the fact that he's referencing that pigs in a blanket thing, which was like a random person chanted it like 7 years ago, and he's still bringing it up like a crazy person. But the idea that it would be up to you, that any white individual, let alone a right-wing racist, would be the one that gets to determine if slogans are acceptable or not, let alone the fact that it's only been explained about 1.5 million times that, like, someone having a cancer pin doesn't mean that they're telling people who care about autoimmune conditions to go F themselves. That's not how it works. We get to focus on things if they need to be focused on. That doesn't mean it's the only thing that needs to be focused on. But of course, there's no point in explaining this, because literally every right-winger who continues to say that Black Lives Matter is discriminatory has heard the explanation a million times, and they reject it because they don't care at all, because they're racist to their core. Now, this is where it gets even weirder. It's been horrific up until this point. It's been deeply worrying. And the next 4 years, if Trump continues on this path, are going to be even darker than the previous 4 have been. But here's where it gets really crazy, because during his interview with Laura Ingraham, Donald Trump spun a few theories about Antifa planes and shadow men and things like that. And I really wish that literally any part of this was exaggeration, but it wasn't. Here he goes.
He's not controlling anything.
Who do you think is pulling Biden's strings? Is it former Obama
people
officials?
That you've never heard of, people that are in the dark shadows, people that
what does that mean? That sounds like conspiracy theory. Dark shadows.
No,
what is
people that you haven't heard of. They're people that are on the streets. They're people that are controlling the streets. We had somebody get on a plane from a certain city this weekend, and in the plane it was almost completely loaded with thugs wearing these dark uniforms, black uniforms with gear and this and that. They're on a plane.
Where's this?
I'll tell you sometime, but it's under investigation right now. But they came from a certain city, and this person was coming to the Republican National Convention, and there were like 7 people on the plane like this person, and then a lot of people were on the plane to do big damage. They were coming for
planning for Washington.
Yeah, this is all happening.
Okay, so this is a thing that definitely happened in the real world. A bunch of Antifa super soldiers got on a plane with a bunch of equipment to do a terror attack, and for some reason Spirit let them bring all of that onto the airline. I don't know. And then they flew into D.C. for the RNC to commit a terror attack. Now, I mention those specifics because I want you to bear those in mind as he, this morning, is asked about that. So again, bunch of Antifa people get on a plane to come and do a terror attack in Washington, D.C. Okay, so he's asked about it again this morning, and here is what he says.
The person was on a plane, said that there were about 6 people like that person, more or less. And what happened is the entire plane filled up with the looters, the anarchists, the rioters, people that obviously were looking for trouble. And the person felt very uncomfortable on the plane. This would be a person you know, so I will see whether or not I can get that person. I'll let them know, and I'll see whether or not I can get that person to speak to you. But this was a first-hand account of a plane going from Washington to wherever. and I'll see if I can get that information for you. Maybe they'll speak to you, maybe they won't.
Oh, yeah, maybe the voices will continue to speak to him, maybe they won't, because in the span of 8 to 10 hours, suddenly now, it's not Antifa going to the RNC to commit a terror attack. Now it's a plane full of looters and rioters flying from D.C. to somewhere else to do something, and a person that you know, who's the you? Anybody who's listening, you know the person who was on the plane, but I can't tell you who it was, but I'll ask them. He's lost his mind. And we're gonna get into where all this comes from. But Dan, help me out here. What is going on in America?
If you didn't read the last Q briefing, you would have known that Jeffrey Epstein is the one on the plane. And Donald Trump is waiting for the perfect moment to let everyone know. You know who's on the plane, but he's not going to tell you who's on the plane. We're going to know at some point. But he's gonna be his October surprise. He's gonna tell everyone that Jeffrey Epstein has been coordinating the Antifa super soldiers being sent on Spirit and Allegiant flights business class all over the country. And
Allegiant business class. Interesting. I didn't know they branched into that.
Yeah, after Trump planes went under, Allegiant folded their business class, and that's what it became. No, I mean, this is the birther guy who's saying, look, I know people, there's this person, and he's going to be in a place, and we're going to find out. I know, but I can't say yet, but we're going to find out really soon. This sounds like the birther thing, where he had that investigator in Hawaii who was in the place, and he couldn't tell you the name of the investigator, and he couldn't tell you what he found, but Trump knew some interesting things, and he was going to tell you some interesting things, and those interesting things were conspiracy theories about the whereabouts of Barack Obama's birthplace.
Maybe Barack Obama was on the plane. Maybe he's the person you all know. I don't know. It makes as much sense as anything else.
Barack Obama is Q. I think that's going to be the thing that blows this all out of the water. He's been playing both sides.
A plot twist. Yeah, no. I saw someone in the comments like, "How do you watch this and not go crazy?" Would you even know if you'd gone crazy? Maybe we've gone crazy. I don't know, because I watch this all day long and it doesn't make any sense. And I think it shouldn't. I don't know, but maybe I've gone mad too listening to this. The President of the United States is talking about men in dark shadows pulling the strings on Joe Biden. And Laura Ingraham, who's in the White House interviewing the president, which itself should be the craziest part of this story, says, now hold on a second, that sounds like conspiracy stuff. Continue. She's not bothered by the fact that it's a raving lunatic conspiracy theory. She just wants to note for the record that it kind of sounds crazy. In the same way that she input, hey, the golf choking thing, maybe you shouldn't talk about the cops. She's not actually bothered by it. She's just doing damage control for America's lunatic grandpa. I mean, the dark shadows thing we just have to set aside. We can't even focus on it because we got to focus on Antifa plane. On Antifa, Flight 388. So where is this coming from? We believe that we know. Ben Collins of NBC News has done a good job of tracking this down. So the claim about the flight matches a viral Facebook post from June 1st that falsely claimed at least a dozen males got off the plane in Boise from Seattle dressed head to toe in black. The post by an Emmett, Idaho man warned residents to be ready for attacks downtown and the residential areas and claimed that one passenger had a tattoo that said Antifa America on his thing, which is definitely a tattoo that someone has. And you can see the post actually below. We'll put it up. This is a crazy Facebook post that got shared about 4,000 times. Maybe we can bring it up. Yeah, there you go. About 4,000 times. Is Russ Thor Wade the person everyone knows who was on the plane? I don't know. But apparently Donald Trump saw a crazy conspiracy theory on Facebook a couple months ago, and now he just rolls it out for whatever situation. So the RNC almost got blown up by Antifa because of this conspiracy theory. Now people are going from Washington, D.C. to other cities. It's always changing who is on the plane. It's just a crazy person reading Facebook conspiracy theories and changing it to suit whatever he wants. And I don't know if I've lost my mind yet, but I hope that it comes soon, because you can't live sane in America 2020. It's not sustainable.
You're absolutely right. I ironically tweeted at one point at twitter.com/Dan from the web. I'm for maximum hell world, but I'm not for maximum hell world. We are in maximum hell world, and it's literally only getting worse. The dial of hell world is quickly moving into the hot position. I have one serious point and then actually two fairly serious points. But the first thing is this pattern of Donald Trump running as a challenger, even though he's the incumbent. So that dark shadows thing you were mentioning earlier, he's saying that there are other people pulling the strings, that somehow Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, who, to be fair, have this sort of they can pull the strings from behind the scenes within their own party kind of way of working with things. But they don't have political power. That's the whole point. Anytime Nancy Pelosi does something and capitulates halfway through, the Republicans kind of ignore it. So the Democrats don't have any power. But in order for Trump to run his strategy, his winning 2016 strategy, he still has to be the challenger. He still has to act like he isn't the incumbent, because if he runs on the past 4 years, his poll numbers might hit their lower floor. So that's kind of the sadder, sicker thing that's happening more insidiously as he populates the airwaves. And then really quick last thing. Obviously, we all know that Facebook has a well-known liberal bias. I mean, I hate this argument so much. In addition to the person who's tracking the top 10 most shared things on Facebook and how often it's Ben Shapiro, the Daily Caller, regardless of the fact that right-wing fact-checking, quote-unquote, outlets are part of Facebook's fact-checking consortium, and they are helping to pollute and spin things that way. Never mind that these viral things go on popular on Boomer Book literally all the time. Yet we'll still have people going up in front of Congress, literally trying to seriously make the argument that Facebook is biased against conservatives. Yeah. It's so obvious. It's so painfully obvious. And yes, that's where the insanity starts to come in.
Yeah. And so here's the thing about having a cult of personality worshiping an insane person, is that it trickles down, and all of the followers have to match the crazy, because if they weren't to do that, they would have to acknowledge that this is insane. And so they're not ready to do that. And so what do we have? So Trump is talking about Antifa planes and how Antifa is everywhere. So last night on Tucker Carlson was talking with Chad Wolf of the Department of Homeland Security and says, why haven't you arrested the leadership of Antifa yet? And Chad Wolf talks about how he and Bill Barr are working on it, of arresting the leadership of an organization that isn't an organization and has no leadership. But they're going to track him down. And then this morning, Senator Rand Paul said that he is doing some sort of request that is going to force Antifa to disclose its flight records and tax information. There's no flight records. There's no flight records. It's not an organization.
They literally think Antifa is a 501c3. They think they're just going to pull up their information somewhere and just be able to get it. They're literally going to they're going to FBI SWAT the guy who runs the leader of Antifa Twitter account, ironically, and they're going to be like, we got him, we found the leader of Antifa. He even tagged us saying, at FBI, I'm the leader of Antifa. We got him, ladies and gentlemen. These people, I mean, we know they're not, taking the assumption aside that they are not good faith actors, the kind of people who would call Joe Biden a Marxist socialist would not care to understand the specifics of Antifa and how having a non-democratic, decentralized structure allows it to function on a local basis. Never mind that obviously they don't care about that because they're interested in creating a framework. But once you understand that they're going to call Antifa whatever they want to and pin it as whatever they want to, these defenses are ridiculous. What criminal syndicate has a box down at H&R Block where the FBI agents can just go in and say, okay, what were the deductions? Okay, this pipe bomb stuff looks a little bit interesting. Someone got the new PS4. We'll get that later. Again, we know these people in Trump's government are incompetent and they're morons, but it's on display in a way that is. Yeah. It would be so sickening if there weren't so much else in the news that were sickening, and this were not comparatively a nugget of kind of humor.
Yeah, and then it forces a follow-up question. So Tucker Carlson and Rand Paul, senator and guy with massive audience, paid millions of dollars to cover the news, are they so stupid that they don't know that Antifa is not an actual organization, or are they pretending to not know that? to please our God Emperor? Which of those is it? Because it's not an organization. We know that. They don't have flight records. You can't, it's not like, oh, I'm going to knock on the door of Antifa headquarters. That's not a thing. It doesn't have leadership. It's literally sort of a vague philosophical stance towards fascism. That's what it is. And generally, those don't have buildings or paperwork. Or are they just pretending not to know that to please the emperor? Is Antifa at the end of the day the emperor's clothes? Anyway, it doesn't really matter which it is. I guess it's a philosophical discussion, but it's scary that it's one of those two. Okay, now, before we move on to Joe Biden, we're going to take stock of the audience, see what's going on.
Hi, audience.
What's that?
I just said hi, audience.
Hello, audience. Army of One says, John, try the book Save the Cat Writes a Novel to take your writing to the next level. Army of One, thank you. I own it. Thank you. Probot Video says, watched Endgame again, R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman, realized that despite what Red Skull said, Black Widow can be brought back the same way Gamora was. No? Maybe, but I don't think that she will be. But thank you for the super chats that have to do with Marvel. Let's see. Okay. I love you guys, says Dragon Squad Assemble. Thanos requires your presence now. Thank you. AJ, thank you as always. Okay. An anonymous gifter has gifted 10 tier 1 subs. Thank you, anonymous gifter. I wonder who it is. I wonder. Ikdar on Twitch says $100 to any reporter who asks Trump to describe Marxism. That's a great point.
I'll match it. I'll match it.
That's, yeah. Okay, so Bart has a comment for us. As I mentioned before, Trump probably thinks pigs in a blanket is from the Denny's menu, along with BLM, bacon, lettuce, mayo, sandwich. And if you're a Marxist, you're related to singer Richard Marx. Good seeing you, Dan. I miss you. That's good.
That's very good. I miss you, Bart. And BLM being a breakfast menu at Denny's, that would definitely be. Although I feel like he would call bacon, lettuce, and mayo like a steak medium rare. I just think that's how Trump rolls.
Yeah. Oh God, so weird. Anyway, okay, let's turn away from Trump for a bit. Let's turn to our chosen avatar, our hero, Joe Biden.
Our Lord and Savior, Joe Biden. Oh my God.
Over the past few weeks, it's become clear that Donald Trump wants the election to be a referendum, not on the biggest domestic failure of government in our life, on the COVID response, but instead on chaos in the streets. Not the actual chaos or the actual streets or the real problems with police, but this fever dream of Antifa and what needs to be done. And that somehow the more violence there is in American streets, the more an indictment it is of some future America where Joe Biden is president, which he's not now. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but you know what? Some shows have complex plots, and I'm trying to catch you up for season 2. So is Joe Biden up for that attempted frame switch, attempting to make the narrative of the election about that? Well, unfortunately, here's a bit of Joe Biden yesterday.
I want to make it absolutely clear, something very clear about all of this. Rioting is not protesting. Looting is not protesting. Setting fires is not protesting. None of this is protesting. It's lawlessness, plain and simple. And those who do it should be prosecuted. Violence will not bring change. It'll only bring destruction. It's wrong in every way. It divides instead of unites. Destroys businesses, only hurts the working families that serve the community. It makes things worse across the board, not better. No, it's not what Dr. King or John Lewis taught, and it must end.
Okay, so look, he's saying don't break things, don't burn things, don't kill people. Obviously, agree with that message clearly. But this is, I would say, and feel free to disagree, Dan, this is Joe Biden going on the defensive on territory that isn't his, that Trump has told him he needs to defend. And so now that's what he's responding to, and denouncing people that have nothing to do with him, acts that are exaggerated or non-existent. It seems like a terrible strategy, and I worry that Joe Biden doesn't get what's going on.
No, that's a really astute observation, John. The way to attack Trump and go against Trump, and I think one of the excellent cases to be made about Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders, if we're talking about the context of the Democratic primary in 2020, were that I think those two candidates understood most of all that in order to go against Trump, you need to go on the attack. Trump is not going to be the kind of person he's going to be shooting so many attacks at you that playing defense is almost accepting what he is saying as true. A lot of / most of what he's saying isn't true. And I think a lot of people know that and understand that. So that's an excellent opportunity as a politician running against him to take back control of the narrative and set the record straight. Of course, there's always the open question that we won't know until the votes are cast, or are they, coming this November. But to what extent does the messaging that the Donald Trump campaign has towards painting Biden as a socialist, like to what extent are people actually believing that? I don't really know if regular everyday Americans are believing that. Like the decision of getting Joe Biden, electing Joe Biden, was very clearly the not socialist decision. If Bernie Sanders has any sort of usefulness in the story of the Democratic Party as to what they are trying to frame themselves as right now, which is a Republican-like party, is that the Democratic Party base had the opportunity to accept socialism, and that didn't happen. Of course, that happened because of a late February rat orgy, but it didn't happen. And so you can, at bare minimum, say that the party rejected that kind of leftist insurgent ideology. And so I don't think even... I think I agree with you. It's wrong for Joe Biden to just accept what the stance that Trump is making him have to defend.
Mm-hmm. And look, it's not that he doesn't then turn and say that the chaos is directly related to Trump. He does, and we might turn to it. So I want to ask you a more general question. The Biden campaign strategy seems to be, hey everybody, Joe Biden is kind of nice, and he's not crazy in any of the ways that Donald Trump is crazy, and that's pretty much it. And I know that a lot of leftists instinctively say that that's obviously not going to work. I'm inclined to think that it's not going to work, that it's not a strong way. But assuming that Biden is not trying to win over leftists, but thinks that he can win by getting some Republicans to switch over, some centrists, do you think that that strategy of Biden's kind of a nice guy and he probably doesn't want to kill you like Donald Trump does, do you see that being a winning strategy? How comfortable as of today do you feel about November if that's the way this campaign is going to be run?
I would reframe that question only slightly. In my perspective, Joe Biden's strategy is to not rock the boat on public opinion of Joe Biden. He's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, where if Joe Biden doesn't speak until November, my blood pressure will go down because he'll have fewer opportunities to mess up, but we'll have fewer opportunities to judge him, or we might actually go into the how is his health sort of thing. So because of that, Joe Biden has to speak. But yeah, Joe Biden speaking is a significant problem most of the time. So he just gets into gaps too easily. So Joe Biden has to walk this tightrope of being visible and standing up as the non-Trump option, while also not really saying anything too substantive or rocking the boat at all. Because like we said, I've gotten all of my anger about this choice that the Democratic Party has gone with, but they've gone with the least resistance to having that imaginary centrist middle of the road Republican voter picking Biden over Trump as possible. They want to have that least amount of resistance as possible. And the more Joe Biden gets into even slightly the nuance of more has been taken from African Americans in this country than any riot can possibly make up for. Joe Biden can't touch that, because even though I strongly agree that's the right point, and maybe you get Joe Biden to crack open a cold one, maybe he'll agree with you, but he cannot make that point because he needs to be the path of least resistance for being a referendum on Donald Trump. Will that work? I hope so, but I don't know. I just see that as being his strategy and that as being his restraints.
We've got a video. Skip, if we could go ahead to the "Do I look like a radical socialist?" Skip one and go to the next Biden video. Basically of Biden trying to make that point, and this really goes back to what you had said earlier about the attempt to pitch him as this radical Marxist or whatever. Here is Joe Biden.
Ask yourself, do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really? I want a safe America, safe from COVID, safe from crime and looting, safe from racially motivated violence, safe from bad cops. Let me be crystal clear, safe from 4 more years of Donald Trump.
I mean, he's basically laying out what Dan is saying specifically. And look, I wish he was a radical socialist, but he's clearly not. And that's why I think while I point out the insanity of the Democrats saying during the primary that we can't have Bernie Sanders because then they'll call him a socialist, when we damn well knew that they were going to call Pete Buttigieg a socialist if he was the candidate. I'll point that out because that annoys me, and it will in the future when they continue to do it. But I don't think a lot of people who weren't already eager as hell to throw on their red hat and vote for Trump are actually buying that Joe Biden is some sort of Maoist. Like, it's just not Joe Biden. He's been around for too long. People have their opinion of him. If you want to change the opinion of Joe Biden, there are some ways that I think you could actually do that, some pressure points. But him being a radical Marxist, I think that is a bridge too far. And that's why I've criticized that strategy from the Trump administration as seeming pretty desperate. I don't think that that's going to work.
Yeah, me neither. And I will say that I'm gotten my anger out from the way this primary went down, and I've accepted, especially through the DNC, the way the Democratic Party wants to project itself, which is being, as Sam Cedar put it, the Republican National Committee of 2004. But even in a more broader sense, just like a return to a normal where you don't have to look at CNN and freak out because the president said something crazy. That's all he's going back to. But the day afterwards, if we do all this work to get Joe Biden elected, I'm going to be very forceful in saying my real opinion, which is I don't care about any rioting or any expression of frustration, because enough is enough. People were rioting because they had enough when Rodney King happened, and that was literally 3 or 4 years before I was born. And so people have long had enough for my entire lifetime and then some. So like I understand when people get angry. That's not going to be, this isn't me endorsing that necessarily, but I'm not going to rush and get upset at people for destroying property when they literally feel like their lives don't matter.
Yeah. The only point where, to play devil's advocate, I sort of get the frustration about the riots is that how could white America have ever suspected that enslaving a people for hundreds of years, and then once they're finally freed, instituting a nationwide set of laws that make it impossible to even live, brutalizing them, lynching them, setting up police specifically to stop them from living even a shadow version of the American dream. And then once we finally get past a little bit of the more explicit versions of that, insisting that racism never existed, that slavery was actually good, how could they have ever thought that that would lead to anything bad happening?
For all these people, we like to say that the Republicans are really smart with business, but it didn't seem like they priced in the cons or like the potential downsides of the strategy they've decided to go forward with since the Nixon days. They're like, pros were able to build this borderline unbreakable hegemony of the rich, white, male, and wealthy. Cons, we might start an uprising, the likes of which America can only relate to maybe the French Revolution. How about them tax cuts? Like, that's what happened.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay. We don't have much more time. I think we can do one more quick story because it's too important to miss. And I alluded to it earlier when saying one of the things that they want to distract from is 100% this. So let's turn now to the pandemic. Remember the pandemic? It's still happening. I know if you just watch the RNC, you might think that it's not, but it is. I'm here to tell you. So yesterday, we found out through the Washington Post that Donald Trump's new anti-Fauci, Scott Atlas, noted not expert in infectious disease, wants to institute a nationwide herd immunity strategy, which is a term designed to shield you from the dark reality that they're just going to let everyone get coronavirus because they think that that's a good idea, despite the fact that they acknowledge it will kill millions of people. Now, that possibility, right? Because despite the fact that early on Donald Trump seemed interested in this strategy, notably in a graphic I've read maybe 50 times on this show, once saying in early April, why don't we let this wash over the country? Trump asked, according to two people familiar with his comments. He had apparently repeatedly raised the question of just letting it wash over the country. Dr. Fauci initially seemed confused by the term wash over because Fauci is a rational human, but became alarmed once he understood what Trump was asking. Fauci said, Mr. President, many people would die. Yes, millions of people would die. Now, it turned out hundreds of thousands would die anyway, but millions would die. And it seemed at the time that must have gotten through to Donald Trump, because at one point in an April 12th, I believe it was, press conference, he talked about the UK pursuing a herd immunity strategy by saying this.
If you remember, they were looking at that concept. It's a concept, I guess, it's a concept. If you don't mind death, a lot of death. But in the UK, they were looking at that, and they have a name for it, but we won't even go by the name. But it would have been very catastrophic, I think, if that would have happened.
So setting aside that Donald Trump will say, I won't even name a thing, which is one of his defense mechanisms when the holes in his brain have facts fall into them, he just did a victory lap, a slam dunk on his strategy being better than the UK, because their strategy was so stupid that you'd only like it if you like death, a lot of death, perhaps millions of Americans. So he would never do that. But then we get the Washington Post story of the past few days, and we covered it and reminded people that this is madness. But you know what would be even more mad? For Donald Trump to come out basically the next day and just confirm it. So in one of the bits of video from the Laura Ingraham interview that I can't believe isn't headline news today, here is what he had to say about the vaccine.
Are you worried that on the push for vaccines, these fast vaccines for COVID, you might be splitting a coalition of Americans, frankly, in both parties, who aren't comfortable
well,
with
once
these
you
vaccines?
get to a certain number, we use the word herd, right? Once you get to a certain number, it's going to go away. So, it doesn't have to be. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are not going to want to do it. A lot of people don't want to do the flu
Should
vaccine.
it be mandatory?
I never had the flu, but I never had
Okay, so again, leaving aside the insanity that Laura Ingraham is saying that once we have a safe vaccine, people would be totally justifiable in not taking it, Trump just casually slipped in, we say herd. Yeah, once enough people have it, we'll be fine. The herd thing. He's now just saying that that's what we're doing. And that is like the 30th most talked about part of that interview, that he just confirmed that they're following a strategy that analysts say that Trump has said in the past would kill more than 2 million Americans, even if it works. And there's very little information that would lead one to believe that it will actually work, since we have no idea if you can even develop immunity to coronavirus. He just slipped it in, Dan. He just said, we're going herd.
I love that this is how we can easily tell this is how Trump's brain works, because herd immunity has been a term in science for a while, and has been a term in virology for a while. But he was explaining herd immunity and the concept of it. He clearly didn't get it. He was totally fine with the potential death that would take place if we had herd immunity with a particular coronavirus that we didn't fully understand. That's extremely contagious, and we're getting news sources coming out from across the world saying that people can catch it multiple times. Like, they can have it within 2 or 3 month span. So herd immunity may not even be the name of the game here as far as having an actual strategy. Again, if we're going to play the game of actually entertaining Trump's crazy ass statements as strategy. But the part where he said, once it reaches a certain number, it goes away. Like, I was annoyed with the Fauci sort of like daddy love almost that was happening earlier. But Trump is now explaining the medical strategy of the country. And his idea of how a virus works is, once you hit a certain number, it's like a video game. When you hit 999, it just doesn't go up anymore. And it's like you have all the coins. What's the point? What's the difference? Like, he is not understanding the weight, the ramifications of the fact that almost 200,000 people now are dead because of this virus, and he is gallivanting about the rest of society and doing everything he can to mess all that up. But these deaths are on his hands. These blood is on his hands, and it's also on the hands of his supporters and his enablers in the media and in the Congress.
Yeah, 180,000 people. Like, if you had heard before coronavirus hit America, or at least before we knew that it hit America, because it was rampaging untested for some time, if you had heard that 18,000 people were going to die, you would have justifiably lost it. Remember those initial estimates, like maybe it'll hit 65,000, and then it seemed to slow down early on, and they were like, well, no, it's clearly not going to hit 80,000. Now we're at 180,000, and they are following a strategy that will kill millions of people in the end, theoretically. And he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about vaccines or about herd immunity or how it works, its limitations, what we need to understand about antibodies and the other things that influence whether you actually develop an immunity to it. He has no idea, and he doesn't care. And honestly, like, we're doing this thing about the Washington Post story and like taking a look at what he says about it, but like, we don't need any of that. It has been clear that that's the strategy that they're following. At the very least, at the federal level, 4 months, they've been doing nothing. Now, that doesn't mean that states and cities aren't doing something. They are. We do have a federal system of government. But insofar as the federal government can influence our fight against the virus, they surrendered literally months ago. And to the extent that he can influence Republican governors and try to get them to do the wrong thing, he has clearly done that. Florida is far worse off than it would have been if you just didn't have Ron DeSantis, because Ron DeSantis, the guy that ran on campaign ads of teaching his kid to build the wall with blocks, is not going to tell Donald Trump to go F himself when he says don't take the virus seriously. And so many more people have died in Florida and beyond. It is only going to get worse. And honestly, this isn't one of those things where you could even say, well, just hope that the vote turns out right in November, because even then, Donald Trump is going to be president until January. So we have surrendered at the very least until January against this thing, and possibly longer. And if he does get a second term, we have no idea when the coronavirus is finally going to be gone, what diseases might follow it. And if you believe that he's going to take the next pandemic more seriously than he took this one, I don't know what world you've been living in. He'll have been reelected through failure in addressing a public health crisis. Why would he take it more seriously when he doesn't even have to run for re-election? Anyway, the future is dark. I apologize. And especially, Dan, you don't get to join us all that often. I don't want the show to be super depressing. I just want to have fun with you, buddy.
No, it happens. It's the world we live in, and it's all right. Maybe we can do some post-game. I could come on Common Room again. We could do some stuff like that. Or we could just like have a bros weekend and just do some gaming. If you're in the Flight Simulator, that would be really fun.
Assuming it installed correctly, because man, that thing is a 90s nightmare.
It's just like one Call of Duty update. It's fine.
Exactly. Oh my God, yeah. I think it was 150 gigs. Anyway, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people watch more of your videos?
YouTube.com/Dan from the Internet. My political explainers and my new semi-monthly show, Power Report, will be all there. Check it out. Follow me on Twitter @Dan from the Web. And send all of your love and appreciation to John Iadarola and the team. Oh, it's an awesome show. I am very biased when I say that, but appreciate the work you all do every day.
Well, and we certainly miss you. Not here, no one else is here, but wherever we are around LA and around the country, your presence is still missed, even though it's been quite a while now. And we still hope that someday we're going to get you back. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Cheers, man.
And for those of you at home, let's check in with just a few more super chats, tweets, and comments. Okay. Let's see. Eclectic Miscellanea on Twitter at #TDR Live says, what's going on?
I don't know. I think Skip has this special effect in his thing that's like a hand that transitions in between scenes.
Is that what it was,
I don't know.
Skip?
Skip's got to transition something. There
Whoa.
you go.
That was
pretty sick.
cool. Okay. He just gave you the finger, basically. It was the good one, but still.
Just like
okay. Well, thanks again, Dan. Collective Miscellaneous Miscellanea over on TDR Live says, Trump is giving his base what they want. Biden isn't. He's promising donors that nothing will fundamentally change and refuses to give his base what they overwhelmingly want. Medicare for all, Green New Deal, other progressive policies that are now mainstream. This is a recipe for disaster. Collecting miscellanea. You are 100% right. That is why I am so scared. Chris Fox says, hello from Vietnam in the super chats, an oasis of sanity in the sea of madness. Hello, Vietnam. And hello. Agent Smith says nothing at all. I don't know what in reference, but thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate that and your others, including Make America Great, or Make Antarctica Great Again. Let's send him there. He can go deal with the penguins and have a great time. Okay, Torin Tokorowa says, apparently people in the street control Biden. Am I not one of them? I'm trying to make him go to progressive legislation and I'm failing. John, you try. We're trying. Bernie's trying. It's tough. It's not who Biden is. He's not being controlled by AOC. I wish he was. I wish AOC was controlling him like the inside of a mech. But unfortunately, that's not the way it's actually going. Let's see. Kelly June says, Bart, we need to see the undies. No, not on my stream. No undies. C-Dubs on Twitch says, greetings, John and fellow Dragon Squad members. Get to watch live for a few minutes today. Busy working from and being a teacher these days. That's got to be rough, but I'm glad that you were able to catch some of the show live. Okay, Greg McGraw, final super chat, says, the guy's named Dr. Atlas and believes the weak must perish so the strong may prosper. Is there a word for government by comic book villains? 100%. I said on the show yesterday that it doesn't even sound like a real name. It sounds made up, and I fear that it might be. Okay. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. A big show. It was a rough one, but hopefully we made it a little bit tolerable. Later on today, by the way, the main show is going to be doing coverage of today's incredibly important primary elections with Senator Markey going up against the Kennedy. And we've also got the Alex Morse race against Richard Neal. These are huge, consequential races that you should definitely tune into our coverage for. I believe it's going to be Cenk Uygur breaking it down with Ryan Grimm. So you're not going to want to miss that. Ryan Grimm has been doing great reporting on the Alex Morse race. So should be a lot of good conversation there. And that said, tomorrow, join us in the morning on the Damage Report as myself and Jared Jackson report on the results of those elections, as well as the other big news of the day, including today, Donald Trump visiting Kenosha. God only knows what's going to happen, but tune in tomorrow on the Damage Report and we'll break it down for you. Until then, stay safe out there, stay sane out there. I'll see you soon.